this video, we're going to teach you how to play Ice, an exploration 3D tile mining game where 1 to 5 players will dig through the layers of ice looking for buried treasures that they'll bring back to the city, earning their respective guilds' prestigious renown. But before we begin, please make sure to follow the setup instructions on pages 4 and 5 of the rulebook, or just watch the How to Set Up Ice video. Ice takes place over the course of 7 rounds, which are called days within the game. Each day consists of 2 game phases: the preparation phase that all players do simultaneously, and the exploration phase, which composes of several rounds where each player takes their turn. Let's look at each phase separately. But first, there are just 2 terms in the game you need to know. EP, which stands for exploration points, are the actions in the game. RP, which stands for renown points, is what you're trying to achieve in the game for the highest possible score. In the beginning of each preparation phase, all players reset their exploration points on their guild board. This tracks the number of actions they can take in the day. It always starts at 5 EP and can start higher if any player has a planning token, but we'll get into that later. Then reload artifacts. If there are any face down artifacts on your player board, flip them back up and they're active again for the next day. Then, if you have the first player marker, give it to the next player on your left. From the second day onward, flip over the next logbook card from the logbook deck. These are events that will have an impact on 1 or more players of the game during that day. However, no logbook card is flipped on the very first day. Clockwise on their turn, each player performs actions by spending EP. A player may spend from 1 to 2 EP on their turn, but they must spend at least 1. Turns continue around the table with each player taking up to 2 actions. And it goes on like this until you spend all of your actions, which will trigger the end of your day. At the end of a player's day, when they can no longer play any other actions, they can optionally send up to 3 artifacts on their board to the city. Simply take the chosen artifacts off your board and set them to the side of it, face down. These will be used later to validate request cards at the end of the game. Artifacts have an anima or power level that's in the form of these dots. It'll be either 1 or 2. When you send artifacts to the city, you immediately gain a number of RP according to the artifact's anima power. In this example, the player has received 3 RP. Players' expedition leaders start off the board, but you want to get them on the board somehow. There's 2 ways to do that. First is the build a camp action. You take an available camp from the reserve if available, and your expedition leader from wherever they are, inside or out the board, and as a single action you place both onto an uncovered tile on the board that does not already have a camp. That's 1 exploration point. The second action is the call action. And that means you can take an explorer, either your expedition leader from anywhere on the board or off the board, or an archaeologist from the reserve, and call it to an existing camp. So it's either this or this, and that's 1 action. For 1 EP, you can move your expedition leader to an adjacent tile. Adjacent means when any 2 tiles share a side on the same level, or when you're moving up and down different levels when 1 tile is overlapping another. However, you cannot move your leader from this tile to this one with 1 action because they are only connected by their corner vertices, and so it required extra movement actions. Your leader cannot move through this. These are rifts, and you'll need to move around them, which will also require extra move actions. The cool thing about moving in this game is that if your leader is on a tile with an archaeologist, you can take that archaeologist with you. In fact, you can take up to 3 archaeologists with you on a single move action. Excavating is one of the most important actions of the game because it's how players dig through these 5 layers of tiles to get to the cool artifacts and stuff underneath. But an excavation cost is 3 actions. Remember, you only have up to 2 actions each turn. So how do you excavate? Well, that's because for every explorer that's on the tile, and that can be a leader or an archaeologist, it reduces that cost by 1. So this expedition leader by herself can excavate this tile by using her 2 actions of a turn. But if she had one archaeologist with her, then it would cost only one action to excavate this tile. In this case, if there's 2 or more archaeologists with her, this excavation cost is free. You simply remove the tile and take it to your hand. If the tile you excavated is a tile from the very top layer, it will be one of these beautifully illustrated snow tiles that are free actions you can use on your turn. You keep them secretly in your hand, and there's a limit of 4 you can have at one time. If the tile you excavated is from one of the artifact layers, you move that artifact to your player board in its corresponding slot face up, and on top of any artifacts that may already be there. More about artifacts coming up. The majority of tiles have an excavation cost of just 3, as long as they are snow tiles or artifacts that are completely uncovered. However, there are some things that may modify that cost, including if there's a camp on it, which means instead of 3 actions, it now costs 4 to excavate. So this would now cost 1 action to excavate even with 3 explorers on it. These tiles are no-attack tiles and are also tougher to excavate, so instead of 3, they also cost 4. And then in this situation, you can excavate tiles on a lower level, as long as they only have 1 tile above them. But again, instead of 3, it's now 4. This tile cannot be excavated because it has 2 tiles above it. But this one can because it's just 1. Additionally, there's a maximum excavation cost of 4 no matter what happens. So in this situation, if you're trying to dig this tile, even if it has a new attack tile above it and a camp, it still only costs 4 actions. So what happens to explorers after you excavate a tile? Well, they fall down to the revealed tiles below, but you must follow the placement rule, which means you must distribute the explorers as evenly as possible among the 3 revealed tiles. If, for example, you had more explorers with you, you could then do something like this. And then again, if you had another one, you would have to place it either here or there to balance it out. In ice, it's also important to remember the collapse rule. After you excavate, there may be a time where a tile somewhere is only connected to one other tile. If that happens, that tile collapses and gets put in the discard bag. In some situations, you may even create a cascading effect, where a bunch of tiles end up getting discarded at the same time. And if there are any other components on these tiles, they go back to their respective reserves. All players start the game with 2 request cards, but if they want to get more requests, they can consult the register, which means drawing 3 new requests for 1 action, and then they choose 1 to keep and discard the rest. Remember, you must validate all requests by the end of the game. If not, you'll get -2 renown for each one you don't. So what happens if you only have 1 more action in a day? Well, you can use it and just do a regular move like this. Or, for 1 action, you can spend it to take a planning token. If you have a planning token, at the beginning of the next day, you must turn it back in, and instead of starting at 5 EP like normal, you will now start with 6 EP instead. This essentially shifts an action to the next day, which could be good. Another action to know about is the overwork action. Normally you just take 2 actions in the turn, and that's it. But if you really want to take a 3rd action, you can. You just have to have that 3rd action available, and also turn in 1 RP. This is called overworking, giving you 3 actions, and of course any free actions afterwards. The final action to know about is the resend action. Instead of sending just 3 artifacts to the city at the end of your day, you can actually send a 4th artifact at any time using 1 action. But this action ends your day, and is often best used when the end game has been triggered and you need to get artifacts off your board. When you excavate an artifact, remember that it has an anima or power level to it, which is either going to be 1 dot like this or 2. When you excavate and place an artifact in its corresponding slot, and it just has one anima, nothing happens. But if it has 2 anima or more, then you can activate its ability once per day. This includes a slot that contains multiple artifacts, adding up to 2 or more anima. When you activate the Obliteration artifact, you can discard any tile that's adjacent to your expedition leader. Any elements on top of that tile get returned back to their reserve, while the tile itself goes back into the discard bag. You only activate the Philosophical artifact when the tile is being discarded on your turn, whether through some effect or like the Obliteration artifact we just told you about. But instead of removing the tile and putting it in the discard bag, it goes into your hand instead. When you activate the Harmony artifact, after excavating a tile and placing your explorers, take 1 extra archaeologist from reserve and place it with your expedition leader. This, of course, can trigger more free actions. After activating the Achievement artifact, simply move your EP marker up by 1. The Exalted artifact is one of the most powerful in the game, which is why it costs 1 EP to activate it, and it must be one of the EP you use during your turn. To activate it, simply bring all adjacent archaeologists and nearby tiles to your expedition leader. Prismatic artifacts don't have an effect of their own, but you can use them as a wild card and place them with any other artifact to add to their ability. When you reset your EP during each day, you can use this opportunity to move a prismatic to a new slot. The endgame is triggered when one of the following 2 conditions are met. After excavating, whenever an edifice tile from the last layer is fully uncovered, it is immediately turned face up. It does not need to be excavated. And then, the player who uncovered it gains 2 RP. All players, including the one who just revealed the edifice, can play a final turn, and then the game ends. The second way a game of ice can end is if during the preparation phase, the last logbook card is revealed. Players then complete 1 last day, and the game ends. Before players start tallying their scores, they must first remove any artifacts that they did not send to the city from their player board. These will not count towards any final scoring. Then, if they have any prismatic artifacts, they must decide what each of their final forms will be for scoring purposes. This can no longer change once decided. On the score pad is where each player will mark down the scores they got for decrees, requests, and extra renown. With the 3 revealed decrees, add up the RP brought back by all of your artifacts. If you meet the condition of a decree more than once, you gain its RP each time. Each player then validates their requests that they're able to pay for. To validate a request, players must pay for it with the artifacts they sent to the city during the game. The same artifact cannot pay the cost of several requests. Unvalidated requests cause you to lose 2 RP per request. Then, add up the RP earned by your RP tokens during the game. The player with the highest RP score wins. In case of a tie, the players share the victory. In Ice, whenever you uncover a new edifice, that edifice will create a brand new variant effect, which you can apply to your next game. Refer to the edifice booklet for explanations on how each edifice may change subsequent games. Stay tuned for our next video on tips and strategies.